Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching the Fantasy Points live stream, first ever demo tutorial of the great Fantasy Points data suite. Our data suite is pretty sweet, I must say. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Sorry for that. Yeah, it's awesome. We really think it's the best thing ever. And we're really excited to show it to you, all the different things it can do. We'll pull up some cool stats, but first there's been some breaking news. Tennessee Titans have signed DeAndre Hopkins. So I figured it would be best to just, from a fantasy perspective, quickly break that down, what our thoughts are. I think immediately, obviously, this is a big benefit to Ryan Tannehill, who is one of the better values in drafts, especially best ball drafts all offseason. Really underrated. Since he took over from Marcus Mariota, he's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in football, despite, a really poor supporting cast outside of, for a number of years, AJ Brown and Derrick Henry on the ground. Last year is, one of the worst supporting casts in all of football. He scores more rushing touchdowns than he gets credit for. And now he has a reliable, trustworthy wide receiver one. Obviously, this is bad news for Treylon Burks. If you were drafting him, it was really based on the thesis that, he was going to continue to get those design targets, be the focal point of a passing attack with really minimal competition anywhere else. I'm super out on him. This is a player I was not very bullish on at all as a prospect. Chigo Conquel, I still like. I think he's still a value. Now I would rather have Greg Dulcich as my high upside sophomore tight end, but I do still really like him. He had more receiving yards than Treylon Burks last year on like 80 fewer routes run. It was one of the best yards per route run seasons ever by a tight end, let alone a rookie tight end. And we know sophomore tight ends tend to make a significant leap. And then DeAndre Hopkins, I felt like he was overvalued all offseason. I think he's still a little overvalued. Just like from a player perspective, there was that trade from Houston to Arizona. And like, obviously it's one of the worst trades ever, but a number of GMs were quoted anonymously, and two of them said they actually didn't think it was that terrible of a deal. I mean, it was, but to them on tape, DeAndre Hopkins had lost a step, and it was like clear on tape, and they weren't sure how many years he had left. Well, his first year with Arizona, he was an absolute monster, nearly 90 yards per game. But then 2021, he fell to a worst ever year, 57 yards per game, a massive decrease. It was something like 47% decline for a player 29. To me, that was okay. Yeah, I think the age cliff hit him hard. He also got popped for steroids that season. It's like, this guy's averaging 57 yards per game on steroids. That's not good. But then he had a massive resurgence last year. He benefited from Marquise Brown's injury for sure. And it was, very reliant on volume. So maybe there is an efficiency decline, but target volume has to be good in this offense just because there's no one else. Obviously, Tennessee doesn't throw the ball as much as we'd like. But to me, it's, upgrade Ryan Tannehill, downgrade Treylon Burks, very slight downgrade to Chig, and then not really drafting Hopkins in his ADP range, but I don't expect him to fall too well below that. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, well, let me start with Tannehill. You guys, before you even really work with me, like, I'm going back almost a decade. I've been a big Tannehill apologist, even when everyone thought he stunk. But that said, the guy does have some limitations. You can't overexpose him. It's like he's one of these guys, the higher the volume, the worse he gets. So, right now I have them with 28.2 passing attempts per game. That's low. I mean, that's really low. I'll probably bump that up just a little bit, but this doesn't move the needle for me that much for Tannehill. We do have Will Levis waiting in the wings. And if they are eliminated from the playoffs in like week 16 or something like that, I think they might actually go to Will Levis. So, overall the situation improved though with Levis, because the alternative was what we saw last year with Malik Willis. And then they had to go get Josh Dobbs. The big loser here clearly is Treylon Burks, because I felt very optimistic building the projection for Burks. I wasn't a big Burks guy. I don't think any of us were last year, but clearly the guy is talented. But before this news came out, we were right at his ADP, a wide receiver 36. So that's a real problem. We're going to have to take a couple of catches away, and that's going to drop him down. Chiggy, we were at tight end 9, and me just taking away one catch for like 12 yards kind of bumps him down to the market. So we'll probably be right there with the market, probably going to be a little below Traylon Burks. The one thing is a very low volume, and everybody else stinks. But we know when the season starts, Nick Westbrook-Akina is going to be involved, maybe a little Kyle Phillips. So they do have some options here. So it's not a good situation for any of these receivers, including D-Hop, who was grossly overvalued, Scott.
Yeah. Any thoughts from you, Chris?
I think you guys are being a little bit negative on the D-Hop side of things. I mean, we've seen this Titans offense support fantasy wide receivers, whether it was A.J. Brown or Corey Davis even at times. I know Hopkins is older, he not super efficient in Arizona, but that was also one of the most basic bad offensive schemes we've seen in years under Cliff Kingsbury. I think Mike Vrabel and the coaching staff are going to be good enough. I think Tannehill's good enough to make Hopkins I'm not going to say he's a value where he's been getting drafted, but I think he's right around where he should be. I do agree. Burks, it's really bad for him. The only positive thing you can say for him is now he can continue to be that kind of gadgety, do a few things, not have to be a wide receiver that knows how to run all these routes really well. Now Hopkins can be that guy. It sucks a little bit for my Kyle Phillips love, just because there's not going to be enough targets to go around. He basically is going to have to overtake Burks, which is not impossible, but I'm not something you really want to be betting on. Fine as like a dart throw, I guess, still. But yeah, I think Hopkins will still be okay and can be fine in this offense.
Well, if Burks is their slot, that is a benefit to him. I did say if he was going to be successful early on in his career, it would come from the slot. And to your credit, regarding DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know. I just had a point and then I quickly lost it. What were you saying about Hopkins?
AJ Brown, Corey Davis have had success.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. So what I was going to say was
real quick. I would say Tannehill is starting to decline himself, though. The pounding, the physical pounding. So I don't know if he's the same guy he was 2-3 years ago when he was, throwing 30 plus touchdowns and leading the NFL in like YPA and completion rate, or being way up there.
Yeah. I just don't want to lose this again. To your credit, Chris, Cliff Kingsbury did just have DeAndre Hopkins stay on one side of the field, and they didn't move him around at all. And, that's a disadvantage for a wide receiver. You just put, your best corner on him, and then you kind of don't have to worry about the other guys so much. And maybe in this offense, they move him around a lot more. And even if he is losing a step, well, he could be a big slot a la Larry Fitzgerald late in his career and just smash for fantasy. Like, he is one of the best possession receivers in football. But no, I still don't really love him at ADP. There's just names that are more exciting for me. But because this news broke, we did want to hit on it. But now we can get into, the whole reason for this live stream, which is to show off the greatest thing ever invented. And that's the Fantasy Points data suite. I'm going to share my screen right now.
Yeah, in the slot.
You cut out, John. What were you saying?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe we can, thanks to the Fantasy Points data suite, take a inspection on D-Hop lining up inside, outside, compared up to Burks and all that. But maybe we can get to that when we get to receivers.
Yeah, we could do it right now. So we're going to use our routes run tool. And who do you want to look at? DeAndre Hopkins.
Burks. There was that game where, wasn't it D-Hop's first game, where he he was like all in the slot the whole game, and we were like, uh-oh, and he had like 10 catches.
Yeah. Let me see if I can pull that tweet up really quickly. Yeah, week 7, 14 targets, 46% slot share. Yeah, and just this tweet was kind of saying Cliff Kingsbury's slot wide receiver was an absolute smash for fantasy, and just basically that's a big concern for Rondale Moore this year. We don't know that they're going to live in 11 personnel like Arizona did last year. We don't know that they're going to go out of their way to funnel targets to the slot like Cliff Kingsbury did. But yeah, so you asked me to pull up these two players and look at them slot out wide. So DeAndre Hopkins was out wide nearly all of the time. He was better out wide than in the slot, whereas Burks was slightly better in the slot than out wide. A little surprising, he was only slightly more efficient just because he really lived in the slot in college. But yeah, that was a nice little detour. Here is what the fantasy points data tool looks like. Here's all the various options. We'll start with the more basic tools: basic passing, basic rushing, basic receiving. These are our free tools. You don't have to give us money. You can just access it for free every single week. These tools do not rely on charted data, unlike the other tools. And so if you'll click on basic passing, nothing in here is too mind-blowing. If you want to see passer rating, adjusted net yards per attempt, sacks, scrambles, we have that. We also have the best stats for quarterbacks, which is fantasy points per dropback, fantasy points per opportunity. Those are the most predictive metrics for fantasy quarterbacks. And so again, this just about every site has this. You could also look at it by about 10 different scoring settings. You can
Scott,
filter
would you call fantasy points per dropback a basic stat? Because I don't know if that's basic. I mean, it is basic, but it's arguably the most important, as you said.
Yeah, right. I just meant in comparison to the advanced tool, which has
sure.
like a million different things you could ever dream of. But yeah,
by the way, as you've gone over all these column headers, if you mouse over it, it tells you, it pops up what they are. And I believe we have further explanations as well. So it's just so people know.
That's right. We also have a glossary here if you want to click on glossary. And if you hover over, you could see what things mean. I'm in night mode right now, but you can toggle back and forth between light mode. And so, yeah, I was just saying, yeah, I guess it's not that basic, but where we really differentiate ourselves is through the various filtering options. So if you want to see if it was a home or a road game, if it was a win or a loss, was it a division game, how many points were scored, how many points were allowed, was the quarterback a favorite or a dog in the game? What was the over-under? What was the temperature in the game? What was the weather? Was it a dome game? What was the wind speed? Was it a heavy wind game? What quarter was it? What down was it? Yards to go, yards to goal. So if you just want to see red zone stats, you have that score differential. Was the quarterback leading or trailing? So if you want to see which quarterbacks, when leading in the second half on third or fourth downs, in dome games, we have that.
You have that. Now, Scott, let me stop you right there. And the massively intense filtering system, if you will, it's a lot for the average person to wrap their head around, me being the average person. People may not realize that, but I'm actually a guy who comes to the same conclusions as the A math students most of the time, yet I was a C math student if I'm lucky. So the way I look at it is, let's say we're in season, and you know how you start your preparation early in the week. And let's just say I'm starting to look at Brandon Ayuk for the week. To me, the real value of this is then you go in and look at Ayuk's situation as best you can before the kickoff or whatever, and then filter through and replicate the situation and see what the numbers say. Is that Is that a fair statement as far as you're concerned, or am I not giving this thing enough credit? Because I don't know how you wrap your head around it otherwise, unless you're looking for specifics, for the filtering.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something you can do. I put out a thread earlier today kind of highlighting some of my favorite splits. Like Derrick Henry averages 40% more rushing yards per game when favored as opposed to when as a dog.
Yeah.
AJ Brown last year was best in the league when his quarterback wasn't under pressure. He was worst in the league when his quarterback was under pressure. What does that tell you? If Philadelphia is up against a really good pass rush, you're not going to want to play AJ Brown in DFS that week. Jerry Jeudy is the king against cover one. He kind of struggles against or below average against everything else. And so those are different things that will bring utility for fantasy, for DFS. Those are just kind of the more extreme ones. And yeah, you can just look at Austin Eckler. Let's say it's a snowy game. They're underdogs. And it's a high over under. You can look and see what he did over the past few years in those same situations.
Divisional game on the road, sub 40 temperature, like going in like hardcore that deep. Like, I don't know how you could go that deep unless you were eyeballing the guy going into the week. You know what I mean? Like,
well, here's the thing is you don't have to go that deep. Like we said, for quarterbacks, fantasy points per dropback is the best stat you could use. So like, you don't have to go too much deeper than that. It's just, if you want to go as deep as I go, you can do that. And like, so I made this tool so that it's like perfect for me, who, I'm the director of dank stats, right? So I got to come correct and provide the dankest stats possible. How do you access this tool? You can subscribe over at fantasypoints.com. And right now the URL is data.fantasypoints.com, data.fantasypoints.com. And so this is just the basic passing tool. We have the same thing for rushing and receiving. And then we can now take this up a notch, I believe, John, and we can go to advanced. Let's do advanced passing. And now here's where things get a little crazy. So we have dropbacks, attempts, completions, completion percentage, yards per game, yards per attempt, touchdown, interceptions, passer rating, sacks, sack yards, adjusted yards per attempt, scrambles. And then here's where it gets really more complex. Completion percentage over expectation. That's your best proxy for quarterback accuracy. How accurate is a quarterback? That's a great stat. Average depth of target, deep throw percentage, deep throws, yards after the catch percentage. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to rank number one. Adjusted completion percentage, first read percentage, which quarterbacks struggle to move through their reads. Accurate throw rate. So an even better proxy for how accurate a quarterback is accurate throw rate. Catchable throw percentage, same thing. Off target throw rate. Turnover worthy throws, hero throws, or just like extraordinarily impressive throws, or throws that should have been picked. Drop percentage, drop yards, time to throw, time to pressure, which sacks were the fault of the quarterback, avoided sacks, pressure rate, pressure to sack ratio, pressure rate over expectation. No one has these stats. Check down throw rate, RPO percentage, throwaways, batted passes, spikes, fantasy points per dropback, fantasy points per opportunity. And again, we really separate ourselves as no other tool has anywhere near the sort of customization that we offer. It's everything I mentioned before. Was it a win or a loss, a home or a road game, or the favorites or dogs? What quarter was it? What down was it? How many yards to go? Was it just in the red zone? Was it a no huddle? Was it an RPO play? What was the formation? Was it a trick play? What was the personnel? Was it 11 personnel, 12 personnel? Was it shotgun or under center? Was it a drop pass or an inaccurate throw? Was the quarterback pressured on the play? Was there play action on the play? Was there a screen pass? Were they targeting slot wide receivers or running backs or tight ends? Was Was the throw accurate? Was it a contested target? Was the receiver open on the play? What were they getting blitzed on the play? What was the coverage shell? Was it man coverage? Was it zone coverage? What was the score? Were they leading or trailing? And so, yeah, you could do just about anything with these filters. Chris, you want to give me a good one?
Well, let me ask Chris real quick a question, not to steer this, but everything Scott just showed on this screen here, when we click to the defense, I did not even realize that this was a thing, but we're doing like kind of the inverse of this, right? Where we are looking at what the defenses are giving up in all these metrics, correct?
That's exactly right. So the Titans gave up the most passing yards last year. The worst overall passer rating allowed was the Raiders. And again, we still have the filter option. So if you just want to see which defense gave up the most yards to slot wide receivers, you would just come here, click that, hit apply. You want to guess who it is? I know who it is.
Oh, which defense gave up the most to slot receivers last year?
It was the Titans.
Wow. Yeah. They've been bad for a number of years.
That's super useful for fantasy is, you want to see if your receiver has a good matchup that week. Well, how often are they in the slot? Are they up against one of these 10 defenses? Because you should probably play him, especially in DFS. And so we also have this on the offense level. So which teams had the most yards thrown to slot wide receivers? I know exactly who it is. I'll give you a prize if you get it. Which team had the most receiving yards to slot wide receivers last year?
Wow.
I know Chris knows who it is. Do you know who it is, John?
Well, I'm not going to go KC because that was
It's
Juju.
KC, and that's a big reason why I love Kadarius.
Yeah.
Mecole Hardman's not there. Juju's not there. That was about 40% of their total slot routes last year. And so, yeah, you could look at it on the player level, the offense level, the defense level.
Which at some point, not to go way too ahead of ourselves because this thing is just being completed, but at some point there's got to be some sort of marrying of these two, to not automate, but have the tool like isolate, maybe do some of the legwork for us. You know what I mean?
To everyone who's dropping questions in chat, we're going to pick those back up at the end of our little demo. Really appreciate that. We'll make sure we hit on every single one. I'm sorry. What was that, John? I just got a little distracted.
Oh, no. Well, we just got a good question here, by the way. No, I'm just saying, like, we have the data for all the offensive players and all these metrics.
Oh, I know what you're saying.
And then we have the data for the defenses that they're giving up for all these metrics. So there's got to be some sort of marriage and pairing to where we can isolate great matchups for the players who are doing well in these metrics and the defenses that they're facing this week, which are not doing well, covering those metrics, if you will.
Right. So, John, this is in beta. This is the Fantasy Points data suite in beta. We are continuing to improve upon this every single week. And so a focus for Chris and I is making a number of matchup tools. So it's like, I said that fantasy points per dropback is the best stat for quarterbacks. So what we're going to do is we're going to have all the quarterbacks by fantasy points per dropback, all the defenses by fantasy points per dropback allowed. And then who are these quarterbacks facing that week? And what is the expected fantasy points per dropback? Who should you be targeting in DFS? Like, honestly, like if you're making quarterback rankings, you don't have to do a lot more than their fantasy points per dropback versus their opposing defense's fantasy points per dropback allowed.
Yeah. And I project the number of dropbacks, by the way.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a key. That's a key ingredient for sure. Dropbacks per game. That's important. Well, let's move on to advanced receiving. And Chris, you can help me with the filters, maybe some impressive filtering we can do to show something that's fairly actionable. And so again, so you have routes, every stat you could possibly want: routes, route share, ADOT, air yards, air yardage share, targets, target share, targets per route run, receptions, catch rate, yards, yards per game, yardage market share, yards per route run, yards per target, yards per reception, yards after the catch per reception, yards after contact per reception, touchdowns, touchdown market share. And we're just getting started, folks. End zone targets, end zone touchdowns, missed tackles forced, first downs, drops, catchable targets, design throws, contested targets, passer rating when targeted, first read targets, first read target share. That's a great stat no one else has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Threat rate, yards per target over expectation. That's another amazing stat that no one uses for some reason. What percentage of their routes came out wide versus in the slot, in line, in the backfield. Let me just filter this by first read target share. So this is one of the better stats we have, and it's unique to us. So T. Higgins as a rookie, Jamar Chase as a rookie was about even with T. Higgins. And then as a sophomore, he really surpassed him and became that alpha wide receiver one. Garrett Wilson, he made me so much money in DFS last year. Why? Because whenever the backup quarterbacks came in, he was putting up a first read target share in line with only Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp. Why is Brandon Ayuk one of my top breakout players this year? It's because last year, to start the year, Debo was a massive alpha wide receiver one with a really high first read target share. And every week that started to slip, and Ayuk gained more and more ground to the point that at the end of the season, Ayuk was the alpha. And I think he's going to be the alpha in 2023. Any questions or comments before we move back into the filtering options?
No, I mean, first read is pretty self-explanatory. You sort by first read, and you have nothing but superstars, of course. And I think your Garrett Wilson example is great because it's, he doesn't fit in. You have a bunch of 5+ year, 3, 4, 5 year veteran superstars, and then Garrett Wilson, which probably bodes well for, I would think Aaron Rodgers will feel the same way, though. He's going to gravitate toward his most talented guy. Yeah, I mean, it's a little overwhelming here, Chris. I mean, what would your advice be to those like me who I get it all, but a little overwhelming here? I mean, how can we narrow the focus down? How can we wrap our heads around this, or at least start to? Yeah, any thoughts?
Yeah, so like Scott said, going through all these, so you could not even ever open the filters tool, and this is still the most revolutionary data tool ever created. Like first read percentage, like yards per target over expectation. There's just stats in here that you are not going to find anywhere else that we know of anyway.
And those are important, actionable stats. We're going to have complementary pieces of content to really let you know what matters, what's predictive, what's important, how to use this, and why. So we'll help the reader out with all that.
One of the big filters that I've been using is simply the qualifier. Basically, like when I'm looking at running backs, the data can get a little skewed if you're just including everybody. Like Zonovan Knight comes out like way up top. So I'll do like minimum 100 carries, so I haven't gotten too much into the really advanced filters that we've covered here, but there's a basic one right there. The qualifiers, minimum routes run, minimum targets, minimum receptions, minimum yards, minimum game played, and things like that. We can go into the splits as well, but I mean, yeah, I mean, there are two different layers of filtering, basically, right, guys?
Yeah. Well, here's a basic filter for you. So remember we're on first read target share, and we see Amari Cooper ranks 11th, right? So we'll go to the filter, and we'll just go away. So we're only looking at road games now.
Right.
And remember, Cooper ranked 11th. Let's see where he ranks in road games.
He is a little bit of a whiner, he complains if he doesn't get the ball, he checks out. So
well, Chris knows my conspiracy theory on this. And so where is Cooper? 36th in first read target share when on the road. This has been here. I'll even go to team so you could see. Oops. he's not even the wide receiver one for the Browns on the road. That's when DPJ sort of usurps him. And this has been going on for years. And my theory is just that, so 26.5% for DPJ. So DPJ is the wide receiver one for the Browns on the road. He also outscores him 12.2 to 11.3 fantasy points per game. And this was going on back in his Dallas days. And so either he needs to do a promotion with Tempur-Pedic, or he just like, when he's away from his wife, just like parties his ass off on the road. But for years, a DFS cheat code has been play Amari Cooper at home, never play him on the road. And it's worked out. And last year you could have played DPJ on the road and made some even more cash off that.
Well, Cooper does have a reputation, like I said, he's a little mercurial. He checks out. Like if you got to get him the ball right away, he checks out. So
against elite cornerbacks, he's always just done nothing. He's just ghosted that entire game.
Right. I mean, early in the career for the Raiders, I would just avoid him against man-to-man defenses. Basically, they really seem to slow him down. But, maybe the home road split's a coincidence, but it does seem to kind of be in line with what I've heard about Amari Cooper. And I'm not even talking about what most people realize. I mean, he is absolutely known for, as a guy, like if you're coaching him, you got to give him the ball early or he kind of does check out.
No, I think that's right. I think that's been true of him for quite some time.
How about Justin Jefferson? How about Justin Jefferson at home or in dome games? I saw there was like a pretty big, difference between Jefferson in a dome and not.
Yeah. So that's sort of going to be true for all pass catchers and quarterbacks. It's just that, you're not negatively impacted by poor weather. And so
it's a basic example, but
yeah,
you could always go check it out. Maybe
Justin Jefferson averaged 21.7 fantasy points per game last year, but only looking at dome games, 23.9. So he does get a pretty sizable bump. I'm going to go back to advanced receiving. And again, remember, we have all the filters that I showed before from the basic tool. And then the advanced ones, RPO, trick play, personnel. Was it 11 personnel versus 12 personnel? Was the quarterback under pressure or not? Was there a screen pass on the play? Like if you just sort by yes, it's like Deebo Samuel has 4 times as many yards as the next closest player. Was the throw accurate? You can look at that to see that, Kyle Pitts really wasn't that bad last year. His quarterback just never threw him accurate balls. Who was the best receiver in contested targets? Who was getting open at really high rates? Where were there? Who led the league in slot receiving yards last year? What was the coverage cell? Cover 0, cover 1, cover 2. And we haven't even already got into this. I don't want to blow your mind too much, John. But Chris, any ideas for a filter you'd like to see? Even if you just want to make something crazy just for the fun of it.
How about the Jerry Jeudy?
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So this is something I found in about like week 8 last year. You know what? I'm going to use the split for this, John. I decided I am going to blow your mind.
It better be good because I'm all in on Jeudy.
Turn on the team filter, Scott, before you do this. Match, yeah.
Okay, so we're using the split filter. I want to see what Jerry Jeudy did against all coverage schemes. Typically, you see players who are, a lot better against man versus zone or a lot better against zone versus man. And Jerry Jeudy was kind of unique in the sense that he was far and away the best wide receiver against cover 1, far and away led the league by a landslide. No one else came close. And then against all other coverage shells, he was below average. He ranked 50th in yards per route run against everything minus cover 1. And so what this tells me is, okay, DFS, he's up against a defense that plays cover 1 at a high rate. Play him. And his week 1 opponent, the Las Vegas Raiders, ran cover 1 at the 3rd highest rate last year. So he's going to be a great DFS play. And again, John, to your earlier point is like, okay, well, I'd like to see a matchup tool so I know what defense the receiver's playing and how good he does against those coverage cells. That's something we're very likely to add before week 1.
Then we can examine, maybe it's more just food for thought, but like, what is that a function of? Is that Russ Wilson, against a cover 1, things are defined for Russ, so he's more effective? Is he getting confused on zone looks and the like? Chris, any thoughts on why that was with Jerry Jeudy? I mean, we all know he's a great route runner, so he's going to crush it against man, but he should crush it against everything.
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think it's a function of Russell Wilson. I think it's just a Jerry Jeudy being a great route runner thing. Back in 2021, I think his numbers are similar. He crushes cover 1. I know Brett Whitefield, our college football expert, does all the scouting of wide receivers every year. When Jeudy was coming out, that was his biggest thing, is that Jeudy was one of the best route runners he's ever seen. So he's just going to, when he's matched up man to man, he is going to make his defender lose track of him. That's harder to do in zone as you run in and out of defender zones. They're not as keen on, I got to stay on this guy's hips. So it doesn't mean he's bad against the other coverages, but he is just going to make man coverage so much easier on him. Because
how does he look? How does he look how does he compare to the field in terms of excluding the cover 1 routes?
So we can do that. Scott, if you why don't you reset the whole table here?
And by the way, we could do a 10-year podcast if we really covered every single thing on there. Maybe a 2-year podcast. It's like a marathon.
Yeah, I think
we'll have like white beards by the end of it.
Yeah, I think I've spent thousands of hours testing and whatnot on this, and there's still stuff that I have not looked at yet. So what Scott just did is he basically went into the advanced filters, took everything, all the coverage schemes out besides cover 1. So this is going to be all the stats that these receivers have accumulated when the defense was anything but cover 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my computer's been a little slow today, so I'm guessing it's me and
There
not
it
the
goes.
tool.
Yeah.
And so you'll see Jeudy ranks 50th, 51st, 1.85 yards per route run. And then if we go back and we just do only cover 1, he'll come up top of the list.
And that's a little worrisome.
No, I think to Chris's point is like, that's just what he excels at, is like, you see all those videos of him in training camp routing up a cornerback where the guy is just like 20 yards away running in the opposite direction. That's just like the archetype of player that Jeudy is.
Yeah, and I don't think any of the Denver wide receivers were very good against zone last year. That could be Russell Wilson really struggling and just not putting anybody in good situations, really.
Yeah, because 50 sounds a little low for Jeudy, but data is what the data is. But it might not be all Jeudy, is what I'm saying. I say this as a Jeudy person, okay? I'm freaking high on Jerry Jeudy this year. Let's go, Jerry. I'll screw you over.
We could also download this to CSV. We could download anything that we've looked at so far and pull it up as a CSV file. And so there you have it. You want to look at it? Is it showing for you guys? Oh, I guess not.
You're just sharing the tool.
All right. Well, I don't know how to do that, but just believe me when I tell you.
It's in your downloads folder. Like, it's there.
I mean, I have it up on my screen. It's just I shared the tab. Right. I didn't share the screen, so I guess you couldn't see that. But we have the download to CSV option if you want it.
By the way, we have a new logo that is not present here, right? I mean, we will be, me, I'm an aesthetics guy. So most people don't care.
So a few more tools to show. Passing depth of target. this is just a easy way to look at all quarterbacks by various levels of throw. So who had the most yards last year on short yardage throws? No surprise, it was Tom Brady. Who had the most yards on throws 20 plus yards? It was Josh Allen. Big surprise. Russell Wilson was actually number 2.
Wow.
Tua number 3. And so that's just an easy way to look at that if you're ever curious. That's sort of like what we showed first, the routes run tool. So if you want to see who was the most efficient slot wide receiver by yards per route run, we have that. And okay, Travion Williams, you didn't expect that. So that's when you go to the qualifier.
Yeah.
And we'll do, well, actually, it would probably be better to do.
By the way, Geno Smith, number 1, total turnover worthy throws last year.
Well, he wasn't first in interceptions, so it seems like he must have gotten a little lucky last year.
Yeah.
He was also very high in hero throws, though. So maybe just a guy that is, putting the ball in tight windows, and sometimes that doesn't always work out.
Well, him and Josh Allen were like neck and neck on both.
Yep.
So Justin Jefferson led in yards per route run from the slot last year. Tyreek Hill led in yards per route run out wide. Target per route run. If you want to see their route share, we have that. Who was in the slot most often? Tyler Boyd. So that's just another fun little tool. And again, remember, we're adding to this every single week with more to come. This is one of my pet favorite tools. I've just had this in an Excel file for about 7 years. For running backs, the most important thing is volume. You want to be chasing volume. The best volume stat you can look at is XFP, and expected fantasy points in all of its forms. That's XFP per game, XFP market share, total XFP. That's what you want to be looking at. And the second best thing you could look at, it's not carries, it's not targets, it's not touches, it's snaps. And so we have that as well, snap share. Saquon led in snap share last year. Josh Jacobs led in carry share. McCaffrey led in route share and target share. And remember, you can filter for a week. So if you only wanted to look at week 8, only wanted to look at week 15, you can do that. That's what I'm going to be doing every single week. I'm going to be looking at which running back saw a significant increase or decline in usage. But there's an even easier way to do that. You just go here and you just click on split week and you hit apply. And you could do this for every single one of our tools. What it's going to do is it's going to show you all weeks, all players for the entire season. So if you just wanted to see which running back led the league in snap share last year, you could do that. It was Cam Akers, week 18. He had 100%. That's really rare to see. Ramondre Stevenson had 1 week where he came very close to that. By carry share, Damian Pierce had a 100% week. And again, you could do that for just about all these tools.
You can also exclude a week. Let's say a guy starts off season great, week 1, 2 is great, and then week 3 he suffers like a pretty early injury, and then he's pulled from the game, but then he bounces right back. Maybe has a bye the next week, but you can like exclude 1 week and say over the last month, this guy is the RB5. Of course, excluding that week 3 game where he got hurt. It's always nice to be able to exclude a week for a nice little report like that.
Right. So Joe Mixon last year ranked 6th in fantasy points per game, but he left week 11 early. So you just exclude that. And now let's see where he ranks by fantasy points per game. Okay, well, he's still 6th, but he jumped from 17.1 to 17.7. So you're right. You can look at it that way. If you want to see in half point PPR, you could do that. In tight end premium and FanDuel scoring, Yahoo scoring, standard leagues, we've got it. We'll go back to the main page. Running back plus wide receiver efficiency report. Really, this was just a way to get rushing and receiving on the same page. Because one of the best efficiency metrics we have for running backs is missed tackles forced per touch. And we have a rare outlier at number 1. You'll see in a second. It really is one of the best efficiency metrics, but what you're going to see here is David Montgomery was number 1. Just that's always been the case of David Montgomery. He's a rare running back who is better at forcing missed tackles, than he is gaining positive yards. But I mean, this is really encouraging for Ramondre Stevenson. Khalil Herbert was excellent. Zach Moss actually is like perfectly in the David Montgomery archetype. And then we haven't shown rushing, but rushing is basically the same as receiving and passing in terms of all the different advanced stats we offer. And there's the snap tool. If you just want to look at players by usage in different situations, we're going to be adding game script to this, so you can see trailing versus leading versus neutral script.
Yeah, Scott, I like to look at people never talk about, everyone talks about inside the 5 carries and whatnot, but what about inside the 5 snaps for receivers and tight ends? Is there receivers or tight ends that come off the field when they get close to the goal line? You could take out running backs from the position filter too. Do wide receivers and tight ends.
Guys, what is the functionality of the check marks here? Because that was added somewhat recently, and I see you can check it, but I haven't exactly looked into like what is the, why would you do that? What is the action following the checking off of players?
Well, that can highlight players if you want it highlighted for social. That also ties back into CSV.
Okay.
But yeah, we made this intentionally very friendly for mobile. So something you can do here is, let's say you don't want to show all of this. Right. You can start taking stuff out.
Yeah.
And then you can also move things around. Like if you want this to show up here.
And of course you can save all your preferred settings, right? For most of these.
I mean, that's coming. I don't know that we could do that right now.
Okay. I could have sworn maybe that's
was that wrong, Chris?
No, it's a future thing. Yeah, we'll be able to.
It's a future.
Okay. You've seen all the filter. What John's talking about is you've seen all the filtering capabilities. Right? It would be awesome if you could just come back to a table and click a button and you have all your filters that you had for whatever you may have been looking at. Basically, you'll be able to save your template and reload it as soon as you come back in.
We've only spent 18 months on this tool, and now that we've built it, we've got another 18 years before we probably build every tool that we can off of the tool.
Yep, it's this is very much the beta version. There's so much more coming, so much more stuff to make it easier on the user and just give you, basically let it be whatever the user wants it to be. It can be as customizable as possible.
So here's a potential concern is, Kyle Pitts last year, 84% snap share, but only a 67% snap share inside the 10. So maybe he has less touchdown upside than you've been giving him credit for.
Me personally?
No, just general.
Oh, we. Well, let's see. I have him with 4. Okay, 4. All right. If he can't get 4, then Arthur Smith needs to get fired. No offense. I think he can afford it though. I think he's fine financially. So yeah, I'll say it again. If he plays 16 or more games and doesn't get more than 4 touchdowns, then I think the Falcons should seriously consider removing Mr. Arthur Smith.
Chris, is there anything I'm missing? What else should I start showing before we move on to questions?
I think we've covered a lot of different filter combinations and whatnot. I think we should just look to the chat. Any questions we can answer, any stats you want us to pull, let's just open it up.
Yeah, Thomas, can you start pulling up questions that we haven't addressed yet?
Doesn't have to
some too here.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be. It could be just about the tool in general. It can be about specific stats or filter, whatever you guys got.
Yeah. Well,
just note this is like way too in depth to ever use on mobile. This is desktop only.
Right.
Your iPhone is going to burst into flames if you try and access it on mobile. There's stats for IDP. That what really wasn't a personal priority for me. I don't think I've ever played IDP, but we are adding probably maybe next year. We'll add some more defensive player stuff, but this year we're looking to add a cornerback chart that's especially useful for DFS. So you can just pull up, who are the cornerbacks absolutely getting roasted week in and week out. You're like, oh, wow, this cornerback has been giving up more receiving yards than Cooper Kupp has receiving yards. Like, let me target this player in DFS. So you can access that. You'll see that.
We had Miss Kylene here, who I met on Sunday, actually, in Philadelphia. She's a big guru in the morning listener. Does it have defensive data on how often the defense played against a particular scheme? You mentioned Jeudy ruled against cover one. Does it show what defenses prefer a lot of cover one?
Yeah. So the next tools we're adding are the offensive line versus the defensive line matchup tool. And the one after that is going to be the coverage shell matchup tool. So you'll be able to look at that within that tool.
You can do it now though, too, by going advanced receiving, defense, and then just turn on the cover one filter and the sort by dropbacks. So like Scott said, we're building a tool that is specifically designed to show you that, but there is also a way to look at it now.
That's phenomenal. Let's see what else we have here. Buppity-ba. Yeah. Oh, well, Derek Brown brings up, a point of bringing up slot receivers who actually still perform pretty well outside, which is like D-Hop, I guess, right? Would we qualify him? But Keenan Allen did well on the outside, correct?
Chris, you can see it by total targets
passing
allowed
table,
in cover one.
Yeah, you got to go to the passing table. You can see dropbacks. Not okay. You can do it this way too, but
okay. All right. Sorry.
Most sites, Melvin chimes in. Most sites only give the percentage of personnel usage. This site gives the players and teams used in various personnel settings. Somebody asked what that sample size was for Jeudy.
This was for Derek Brown regarding his Keenan Allen question. Yeah, more efficient out wide than in the slot.
That bodes well.
What was Melvin's question? Can we pull that back up?
More of a statement, I believe. Basically, let's see here. Most sites give the percentage of personnel usage. This site gives the players and teams used in various personnel settings. So you can see the full picture, I guess, right?
Yes, Scott, if you go to snaps tool, you could split by, pick whatever team and then sort by the snaps or split by the personnel. And you could basically see which players played and what personnel. I was actually looking this morning. There's an interesting one with the Giants if you do that team.
Okay. Melvin asks, can we marry the data tool with the DFS optimizer? And in many ways, we can, if no other way, manually, by beefing up projections, the actual projections for the players for the week based on all the data. So, I mean, we haven't progressed to the point where we can, basically come up with algorithms to automate almost everything. We're not there yet, but we will be moving in that direction, and we will certainly have access to and much more usable, readable, actionable data sets that will simply make our projections better, which will therefore make the optimizer better.
Yeah, so if you split by personnel now here. Oh, that's right. We haven't added personnel. So you'll be able to split by personnel, and then you can see basically what happens is Darius Slayton was the lowest wide receiver on the team in 12 personnel, but he played a lot in 11 personnel. So the Giants clearly didn't value him as one of the two wide receivers in 12 personnel, which I think is a little interesting.
Yeah, I was going to show that Tua Tagovailoa was far and away the most efficient quarterback in 11 personnel last year, but against 12 personnel, he ranked in the nearly last in the league. And I guess that makes sense because you have amazing wide receivers and not amazing tight ends.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, that is a little. I mean, Trent Sherfield was good. Is that an indictment on Gesicki? I guess that it's a little weird.
Theo asks, are you able to do predictive stats? I don't really know what that means, but yeah, a lot of these stats are really predictive. Like the best stat ever for wide receivers is yards per route run. For quarterbacks, fantasy points per dropback. And again, you could look at all this stuff by yards per route run allowed, fantasy points per dropback allowed. For running backs, missed tackles forced per touch, yards after contact per attempt. Those are really good stats. And we're going to have a bunch of articles to kind of highlight these. And
also, Scott, maybe Theo is wondering something that I kind of suggested is, maybe you could have the option to turn it on or off, but it would be nice if you see how that one column on the screen is highlighted. If we had what we felt was the most predictive stat on the table highlighted in some way, this way, your novice can go right to the crux of the matter and look at the most important, most actionable data on the table.
What do you think about that, Chris, having a featured stat?
Yeah, that's interesting. The other thing we could do, we kind of talked about it earlier with the templates. We could have, Scott's running back template, and somebody can just load it, and it has Scott's favorite stats for what he looks at running backs every week. And so basically it'll give you what Scott thinks is the most important thing, and you can just go right off of that. We could do stuff like that too.
Thomas, can you pull that comment back up? Something about green zone. What is the green zone? Is that inside the 10? Yeah. So our basic rushing tool is going to be updated within 10 to 20 minutes of the game ending. And so games just ended for, let's say, week 7. You can pull it up, sort by yards to goal inside the 10, and it's okay. Zeke had 4 carries and 2 touchdowns on those. This is, again, within 20 minutes of the game's ending. You could access that. You could see what yards per carry Joe Mixon averaged in the fourth quarter. You could look at nearly anything. For the advanced charted data, that is going to take maybe, 18 hours. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, so your Thursday night game will basically be up everything. So like Scott said, all the basic tables are updated within 15 to 20-ish minutes after the game ends. And then the advanced charting stuff for Thursday, that'll be updated by sometime Friday mornings. All your Sunday games, so that's obviously going to take a little bit longer. So generally we'll have some of the 1 p.m. games start to roll out Monday morning, Monday around noon-ish. We're looking to have basically all the Sunday day games wrapped up before Monday Night Football kicks off. Sunday Night Football's advanced stuff will come out shortly after that. And then Monday Night Football advanced stuff will be Tuesday morning.
So I've showed this off to a number of people in the industry, and their response was all like, who decided to make this $50? This guy is a moron. It's like, well, actually that would be me. I was promoted to CEO a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So everyone says this should be $500. This should be $1,000. Like, it's comparable only to other sites that charge, fantasy websites, $15,000 a year, $20,000 a year, $100,000 a year or more for, and we're just giving it to the consumer for just $50. It's going to be $200 next year. It's only $50 this year. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I really thought anyone who saw this demonstration would just immediately be like, this is the coolest thing ever. I can't wait to play around with this. And so we would get many people using it. And like, our development team did an amazing job. It's rock steady. It's not going to break if we have a ton of users. It's not going to be that slow. And so, yeah, I think this is like a revolutionary product for the average user. Like Chris said, is even if you don't get too into the weeds with the filters, it's still like an amazing product on its own. And if you're a pro gambler, this is a godsend to you. If you're like a legit DFS player or someone who does their own projections, this is an amazing tool for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that,
And
Derek. At $50, this pays for itself week one by
yeah.
your DFS winnings.
But I will tell you one of the main lessons that I've learned in almost 30 years of fantasy football content. People don't even know what they must have. They don't even know, like, I'll give you an example. I've given away a number of subscriptions over the years. I was on a vacation in Key West with my wife years and years and years ago. We met some guy at the bar, started talking. The guy's a lawyer. He asked me what I did. I told him, and he was like, "Oh, wow, I'm into that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll comp you." And then the guy ended up, subscribing for 20 years later. And he was like, "Oh, I can't believe I was on the free sites. Like, this is so much more comprehensive and better, blah, blah, blah." People don't even know what they really want almost until they see it. So they can't see it if it's $500. Most people can, but they're not going to. So it's just an early entry, expose the product kind of a rate, Scott. So I was kind of with you on that.
Yeah, temporary. So make sure you subscribe ASAP. We might raise it at some point, but
and for me, real quick, everybody, there's different types of people will look at this in different ways. Like, I'm not a big data guy and all that. I have a sense of it, of course, but for me, when I'm in the season, I'm really deep in there. And as I'm working on, a Monday and a Tuesday, I know what happened the week before, and I'm getting a picture of where the defenses are. I have, like, the names come to me basically, like 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that just come to me that week as I'm building projections and all that. And now when I can narrow it down, now I can really go in and double, triple, quadruple check on my guys for the week with this tool, which is something I've never had before. So I would imagine it's going to increase the accuracy of those picks.
love it. I believe it. Listen, if there's anything that, is glitching for you, or you have any suggestions on how to make this tool better, we're all ears. You just go top right, provide feedback, and just tool is great, but ... And, I would like Elijah Moore to rank better in every stat, and then you just hit submit. And that's obviously not our developer's fault for Elijah Moore, but you could go over here. We're going to start adding FAQs, tutorial videos. Maybe we'll put this video in there. And again, another place to put feedback. Here's our glossary one more time. And maybe we can find a way to highlight our favorite stat. And then this removes, if you just want to see rushing, that can remove that. That's for social and filters, and then export to CSV. I feel like
night mode, baby.
I feel like I'm forgetting something, but that's how I feel every time I'm in this tool.
There's so much it's hard to remember everything.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do a ton with the rushing, but I would imagine most people will understand. It's pretty self-explanatory.
So this is fun. No, it's a good idea. So the stats that we have, standard rushing, but explosive run percentage, explosive rushing yards, percentage of yards coming on explosive runs, carries inside the 5, your touchdown rate, stuff rate, what percentage of carries gained 1 or more, 3 or more, 5 or more, 10 or more, 20 or more, 30 or more yards, total missed tackles force per touch, yards after contact percentage, yards before contact. How efficient were they in zone? How efficient are they in man? Is there anyone who comes to mind for you?
Well, Scott, you're talking about rushing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, me as a Rachaad White apologist, and it's probably not a major actionable data point, but I did think it was fairly interesting that, as bad as their O-line was, and it sucked, Rachaad Rashad White, among all running backs with 100 carries last year, was 17th in success rate in zone, which was better than Leonard. Actually, it was better than it was tied with McCaffrey. So it was better than like Najee Harris, Eckler, a lot of guys. I thought that was something because they're going to be zone heavy. Like I guess they were before, but I think they're going to be more zone heavy under Dave Canales, which is what Rashad White himself told me. So there you go. Is that an angle on Rashad, baby? Let's go.
Yeah, 3.31 versus Fournette's 2.56. Someone asked about WORP. I don't know what that is. If that's, do you know what that is, Chris?
That's isn't that wow, I'm blanking on what the name is. You mentioned it the other day.
Is it the Josh Hermsmeyer stat?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I didn't include that because I just don't think it's a very good stat. It's not really predictive at all. At a bare minimum, it's redundant and inferior to XFP. And so it's just like, why would you ever use something that's worse than XFP? Because expected fantasy points looks at every carry by down and distance to the end zone, every target by down and distance from the end zone, air yardage on the play. And that's just going to be a more predictive, more useful stat. So that's why I didn't include it. Show the outside zone. Curious on the Houston backs. Okay.
I'm seeing here Isaiah Pacheco once again was just so much better than I thought he would be, honestly.
Yeah, same. He really surprised me last year. All right, here's Houston's running backs. Dameon Pierce blowing everyone out of the water regardless of the concept on the run. Let's see, yards after contact per attempt, no contest. Missed tackles forced per attempt. Yikes. That is horrific. They were just not forcing any. Combined 5 missed tackles on, 100 carries. That's not good. You can't import your league settings, but like we're in half PPR right now. If you play on tight end premium, you can do that. We are at some point going to have a customization option. So you can do that. If your scoring is -6 points per interception, plus 2 points for first down, something insane like that, you can add that in.
Well, we'll probably marry the roster importer for teams at some point and maybe do that. That might not even be this coming year, but we are doing the roster imports for, the main part of the site, which does not include the scoring, but I would imagine we could then go in there and have a team and then, tweak the scoring, save it. And then it's, all the results for that specific scoring show on the main site and maybe even carry over into this, but that's a future project.
And so a lot of these stats are probably stuff that you guys have never heard of before. And I'm sure, John, you can attest to this. I'm sure years ago there was stats that people now reference today that people never heard of. Like target share wasn't something that was used until, the last 7-8 years or something. We're going to all of Scott's content, all of Graham's content, the rest of the team's content is going to be built around stuff coming from this tool. You're going to start hearing household names of first read share and design target share and yards before contact. All these stats are our goal is to make them household names, and our content team and all our content on our site is going to be built around this data.
Yep. Well, my first experience in the fantasy industry with targets, by the way, I'm so old that I may have been the first to do so many things, but I'm just not sure. But I manually counted targets from game logs starting in 1997. So we go from manually counting all the targets for every single player in the game log to this. I know it's a lot of years, but that was my first experience manually counting like out of a newspaper almost, but a game log, and then putting it down on the website in articles and things like that. So that's a little bit of a departure from the old days.
Right. Yeah. Now today you couldn't imagine not having targets be available right after a game.
Yeah.
So someone asked for what about point per carry leagues? I don't think we do that just yet, but I was able to fix my screen sharing, so you can just export to CSV, and then if you wanted to calculate that yourself, you could. So here's who led in rushing fantasy points with that factored in. And it was Jamal Williams. Is that right?
Mm.
Yeah, I guess so. That's pretty crazy. That's rushing fantasy points, not receiving. Yeah.
Well, we can be here all day if we really wanted to. Anything else, Scott, that we want to get to? I mean, we've kind of covered most of it.
Actually, I don't even think I know this answer. Scott, when does it officially go live tomorrow? Do you know?
1 p.m. Eastern? Is that right?
I don't know. That's why I was asking you.
It's like 12.
I feel like I should know.
12 noon would be good.
All right, we'll do 12 noon. I mean, I'll just let them in on the secret. You could access it right now, data.fantasypoints.com. But all week, it's going to be free to use. You don't have to pay for it. But again, it's basically free. It's $50 and it's should be $15,000. So, and we have a show tomorrow night as well. Chris, Brett, and I are going to be popping champagne and demoing the video a second time.
That sounds good.
Well, thanks to everyone who came in and commented and buys a subscription. We really appreciate it. Spent a lot of money on this. A lot of time and effort went into it. Chris and I had a lot of back and forths, a lot of fights, a lot of fun, a lot of not fun, but we both couldn't be any prouder of this tool. And we hope you guys feel the same way.
Single biggest endeavor in the history of fantasy football content right there. That's not hyperbolic by any stretch either.
That's probably right. Yeah. All right. Tomorrow night, we're popping champagne, Chris. Thanks to everyone who tuned in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.